metrics I used to count. No. Okay, so welcome back everybody, and we are going to resume, and first up is AT update. So Dean and Simon, thank you, good to see you.
Yes, so thank you very much, councillors. We've got a presentation just to provide some highlights, but I'm not going to put that on just yet because well, I will actually, but I'll zoom to the end part because I'd like to change the order. Simon will be providing us an update on network productivity. I'd like to start with the last item and then move to the beginning again, so Simon can meet commitment with a very important stakeholder. So if I flick through this, because I don't want to reveal anything before there we go, that was too fast for anybody to read, wasn't it? Right. You're not allowed to read the other slides before you get to them. Hopefully the font wasn't too small or big. Right, here we go. I'm going to hand over to Simon, who'll bring to you an update on our network productivity focus. Thank you.
So you'll recall that 2 meetings ago at this forum, I introduced the whole improving network productivity portfolio, and to some of the comments from councillors earlier, we do try and look at this holistically, so across work streams to make sure we're prioritising movement on corridors, considering making the network safe and providing access to people through the parking programme. So there's 6 work streams here. I'm going to provide an update today on 3 of them, and you heard about time of use earlier in the meeting. So for network optimisation, there's some highlights on screen. In terms of intersections, we are looking to modify 250 for customer benefit this year. One of the recent ones is Hollyford and Aspiring intersection. And you can see by some modifications there's been a benefit to 1,000 bus users through the junction, and saving people around 3 to 4 minutes in their journeys. In terms of dynamic lanes, at Main Highway we've put in a dynamic lane, and in terms of the customer benefit there's 350 people flowing quicker through there in the afternoon peak. And in terms of a special vehicle lane example, Fred Taylor Drive, there we've got 700 people benefiting in the AM and PM peak. So that's the type of thing we're trying to achieve through this portfolio. And to give you a reminder of some of the scale, appreciate this is a busy slide, but there's a number of initiatives happening in network optimisation. So I've referenced the special vehicle lane example there, and we do have we're aiming for another 10 next year. They do take a little bit of time to plan to make sure we're consulting, ensuring they're safe and designing them well, but we do have a pipeline there. And in terms of the bottom right, the smart technology focuses on things such as bus boosters, as we've been referring to them, when we've put in 25 of them already this year, with an aim for 65, and we're looking to pilot the same thing with FENS for their vehicles. And top left, as I mentioned, on the intersections, the aim's to do 250 this year. We've already delivered 70 with another 30 in progress. In terms of the parking work stream or room to move work stream, so we've got 4 comprehensive parking management plans underway now for Albany, Newmarket, Manukau and Ponsonby. So they will be consulted on with the public and look at the balance of movement versus access and new loading zones, for example, things that we often hear from people. So we've got 4 new ones underway, and in terms of an example of something we're focusing on for hopeful customer benefit, at Albany Park and Ride, we have had feedback that it can often be full early in the day, so that's somewhere we're going to trial a new bookable spaces pilot to see if people want to book spaces in advance so they can guarantee a place even if they turn up later in the day. And just lastly, safety. We continue to focus on high-risk corridors and intersections to improve safety at junctions. And you'll see on the right-hand side there, particular focus on safety near schools. So that's just to give you a flavour of what's been going on in this work stream. I'm happy to take any observations or questions.
So because Simon's got to disappear, are there any questions for him on those aspects we've just covered? No, get out while you can, mate.
Okay, and we'll continue to bring updates here every 2 months.
Okay, thank you. Dean, back to you.
Okay, thank you. I will invite Stacey and Murray to join me if that's okay. All right. So this is, before I just talk through some of the highlights and some of the topical updates, and you've had the last one, can I just acknowledge that in the life of Auckland Transport, this week's been a pretty unusual one, and it would be inappropriate not to acknowledge that, but combined with the proposed legislation changes in the CCR review, I thought it was useful to reassure councillors and the public that's listening, we've been singular in our focus. And that is, we are here to deliver great infrastructure and great public transport services. And as we navigate these changes, we remain deeply committed to that. And we remain deeply committed to ensuring that whatever the new design or the new state is of transport governance and delivery in Auckland, that we want to contribute as best we can to ensuring that is the best it can be. We have no interest in not contributing that way, because we don't want the in-state to be a shambles because we didn't contribute in the way that we could. So we're deeply committed to getting the best out of it, and actually we understand significantly that that there is an opportunity to bring the public and elected members closer to a number of the decisions that are usefully made. And I think we've always been open about that, and we've sought to do that in our current construct. A new construct will enable that to happen in a different way, and we remain deeply committed to constantly building public trust and confidence in the way that public transport and infrastructure is delivered. So I just want to acknowledge that, unscripted but important, that we're all in for those outcomes. On that note though, because I believe a lot of good things are happening, we will talk about some of the highlights and some of the some topical updates. So, first one is, we launched contactless payments a few weeks ago on the 17th of November. In approximately 3 weeks, we did 208,000 electronic payments. So these are payments outside the HOP system. There's a couple of awesome things about this number. One is it's 208,000. I mean, I think that's pretty awesome. That's about 5% of all trips. The second awesome thing is the system has withstood the test. It is working. Hasn't fallen over. All the stress testing, all the design, all the planning, all the build of a new system is delivering a solution that Auckland is clearly enjoying and continuing to enjoy in increasing numbers. So we're very proud of that. The second one is we went out with a pothole promise, and this was one of those moments when you draw the ear in between your teeth and you think, will we deliver on the promise? 95% of all potholes repaired within 24 hours of a main road and within 5 days on a local road. 95%. 785 potholes have been repaired, which is a big number in its own right. We wish it was less, but you do have a lot of kilometres of road, 8,000 kilometres of road out there. And we've hit our performance target of 95%. So I've got great gratitude to the team that has enabled us to capture that, ensure that the work's done and reported on so we can go public with the fact that we're meeting our commitment. And I want to say thank you to the contractors that have to do the work and spin things up within 24 hours. I don't want to be left unsaid as well that they continue to change their technology, because we last pothole repairs to last longer and longer. So that's a couple of, I thought, useful piece of good news. Other things that are worth highlighting, I've touched on the first one, which is about new ways to pay. Northwest bus network, we targeted 3.5 million trips at this stage, or we forecast, and we've hit 5. You know, that's an awesome result, and I see Shane's got both arms up and celebrating the moment, so next we'll get a little jig from you. You can stand up. Yeah, that's it. No, don't. Look, can I also call out, we've got a deep focus on how we do special events. Coldplay and Pearl Jam and that was the same period of time that we had the Hikoi through Auckland. So our events teams and ATOC were fully engaged in managing this transport network to ensure that the Hikoi got through and that we were supporting major events. And so I'm calling it out here, particularly with those two, the numbers of people that we are able to move at pace within our agreed timeframes for Eden Park. I know there's always a bit of noise around Eden Park and whether we're doing what we're doing and saying what we're doing, but we are. Okay? We are. And look, the other good thing is Botany Town Centre is part of the Eastern Busway. The good thing about this is we front-loaded that piece of work, which means that people can get in and out of that shopping centre at Christmas when we know that we've got a significant amount of additional traffic. And so I'm really grateful to the Eastern Busway team that they were able to provide for that. Out of what was the otherwise normal sequence. We had a good launch on bus driver screen solutions, and it was good to have you out, Wayne, as part of that. This is a really important investment in safety on buses. It will take some time, but the program around implementation of those safety screens is also built around ensuring we've got buses on the network. We can't take them all out to install them. We've got to take them out and install them as we can, and also time it with fleet replacement. We have a road cone cleanup campaign starting, which is designed to get the clutter off the roads. So if it's not needed, we promise to come and pick it up. And you'll see our pothole promise remains here. We're working closely with all shopping centres likewise, so we can help alleviate traffic demands on main shopping centres and malls, and encouraging people, no matter where they shop, local shops, main shops, malls, destination locations, that they have the opportunity to catch public transport if that's convenient for them. All the shopping malls have committed, and centres have committed to working with us on enabling to the degree that they can also influence movement of vehicles. Now, what I'd like to do is hand over to Stacey. I know a number of you had questions around the recent, some of the recent media regarding an NZTA document on transport patronage and fare box recovery rates. We have been doing some good work on that, and we're across the issues, and Stacey will bring you up to date on it. Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you, Dean. I know there's been some curious questions about what this means, and particularly to public transport fares in Auckland, and last month we did bring you our fare update with increases. It poses no change to that at point. We feel that we're actually very well placed to achieve our targets. So in terms of what we call fare box recovery, NZTA, now term private share, is made of a very similar, what I call, bucket of things, including any sort of revenue from leases across their public transport facilities for retail purposes, public transport fares, advertising, and there's a number of other costs such as to do with ferry wharf fees, etc. And right now, we already have a statement of intent target of 35%, or to be revised 34% in terms of that. So we're well placed to achieve that. So in terms of barriers for us, there isn't a lot in the first 2 years. The next year, the target goes up to 42%, so that's FY 26-27. That's going to be challenging because we're bringing in a whole lot of additional cost to do with City Rail Link to get that up and running, and that will take some time to even out. But by all accounts, we're much more commercially focused by default than a lot of the other PTAs, and that's largely due to our construct. And so given that it's always a focus for us in every financial year, it has been compromised in previous years. A lot of that has to do with policy decisions, which have been made for the right reasons at the right time, but it takes time to sort of change that back. And we've had a lot of cost increases as, relative to increasing bus driver wages, which was absolutely essential. and those types of things. The other side of the conversation, actually, the team are having a conversation with NZTA today, because it is a discussion document. It's not a final document. And as part of that is in terms of what are the other sort of levers for cost control, but also in terms of commercialisation of any assets, services, etc., what can be done. And there's a number of things that, you know, we sort of collectively are looking at, such as if you put too many restrictions about what you want, but by default you can impede an operator to be price competitive. So if you say you can only purchase these two types of buses, that's a big part of where they get their, you know, cost advantage from and competitivity. So we don't want to see those things being eroded going forth, because they're important for the overall conversation and competition of the market. Indexation is, and I know this came up in a prior conversation today, so I wanted to explain indexation. Indexation is not something that Auckland Transport dictates. It's part of an NZTA index that's published quarterly, and it's made up of a bucket of goods that impact the particular sector it relates to. In this occasion, it is for bus. So there's a bus index. There's two indexes now. There's one for electric buses and there's one for diesel buses. Now that means you get compound indexation quarterly. So that's actually quite costly by definition when you look at it that. So we're having conversations with the NZTA about indexation and how that should apply, and should it apply to the capital cost of a contract. Most of our service contracts, and if we look at bus, because it's easier to explain, bus is made up of three cost components. So you've got your capital costs, so you've got your asset costs, you've got time and service, so your service time component, and your hours, kilometres. So you've got those three sort of costs that make up an envelope. So without looking at time and distance together, you can get a perverse result, particularly in an urban setting. So making sure that those types of scenarios are well understood by people, and to work with them on what's going to be a more efficient contracting methodology. Tenure of contract is obviously a big one for capitalisation of assets and that type of thing. So we're doing all we can to help support some of the other PTAs as well. Their challenges are a lot larger than ours, and that's very real for them in terms of that. So we do want to do what we can to support. Yeah.
So if I can just pick up on one thing about that, and then invite Stacey to talk about fare evasion and percentages, and the link between, well, the perceived link between fare evasion and safety. But there's been a number of headlines when we look at private share of fare increases having to go up 70%. We do not see that as being the case in Auckland. Okay? What we have planned and forecast, and where our private share or fare box recovery percentages is, it's close to the targets, except for further down the track, and that's what we need to negotiate. This is a discussion document. So somebody else's headline is not your headline for Auckland. It is not 70%. It is nothing different for this year and next year, or the next couple of years, than what we have planned it to be. And I'm going to labour the point, thank you. I'm going to labour the point. The reason you're there is we saw this coming, and we're also committed to getting the balance right. You've got a commercial organisation that delivers and thinks through this commercially, and we're doing our best to balance all those unders and overs, recognising the impost not getting right on the taxpayer and ratepayer. And Auckland is 60 to 65% of New Zealand's public transport system, so you've actually got an entity that understands these things and trying to balance them all the time. Stacey, did you want to add to that? And then if not, can you please go and talk a little bit about percentage evasion and the perceived link between evasion and safety? Thank you.
Thank you. It's a lot.
I know, but I just, look, it's just a, well, I know I can talk about it, but I know that you'll.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of fare evasion, and I think we talked about this last time, and we don't have a screenshot today. I'm going to commit to bringing one next time so you can see what I'm talking about, because it's actually a really interesting dashboard that the team have developed in response to fare evasion. So what it does is it's made it a lot easier for bus drivers to record where you've got zero fare paying customers come on board, and that way we have what we call a heat map across Auckland of where these things are occurring, and it helps deploy transport officers based on the intelligence that we have rather than a spray and hope approach. That doesn't obviously solve all issues, but it goes a long way to sort of understanding in terms of what's happening out there. So our fare evasion, I'll give you two stats. So for bus, what's coming through that is 3%. That's actually really low. And I know it may sound like a lot, but it's actually really low. Yeah. So if I compare that to my Australian peers, I'm going to have conversations with them. They're above, most above 10%. Yes. And so we're actually doing pretty well. We did, yeah. And we did an audit of a couple of the train lines. I think it was the Southern train line too, and that was every single customer, and it was 2%. So it is actually really good, and having more tools to be able to understand that is important. So it's still more than what Auckland is used to seeing, and what we think we're used to seeing, particularly on the bus network. But we've got good tools now to be able to track it, understand it, and then see what tools we can put in place. Is there a link between that and safety? Look, I think in terms of the potential for some behaviours, yes. I think that is a fair statement, but not necessarily exact either. I think with the new ways of payment coming in, that takes away a barrier for a lot of people. And so then we get a much better indication of real fare evasion, rather than the perception that somebody just doesn't have a hop card, had a legitimate, excuse as to why they didn't have their hop card, etc. Versus, total evasion, don't want to pay, full stop, no matter how you can make me pay scenario. So there are two different things in terms of that. We're still seeing, obviously, an increase from what we had 2019, 2020 in terms of violence, threats and aggression across the network. That is real. That is something we're grappling with every day. And obviously with the bus driver screen rollout, that's one thing. It's not the only thing. We're working on lots of things, including the bystander, active bystander sort of program, and understanding that from a theoretical point of view, from an academic point of view, about what we can do, and educating Auckland more widely about this, about supporting each other. It's a challenge, and it will always be a challenge, but it's something that we're continually improving on with our other stakeholders and agencies involved with us to do that. We have really good working relationships with police, as we've talked about. They're very responsive, and we continue to work with them on different initiatives. Yeah.
So what we'll do is we'll go on to the capital program, and then happy to take any questions. Thank you, Murray.
Sure, thanks, Dean. Just advance to the next slide. Yeah, so capital program is tracking well in terms of delivery against budget, and just a few key highlights shown in pictures here. In terms of road surfacing and renewals, we're ahead of program, and this is key and important to fix the underlying problems that are causing potholes. And related to that is the storm recovery program. You can see on the top left, work's going on at Scenic Drive, a significant amount of work's continuing with the storm recovery program, and that's making really good progress, and we expect to see a number of these sites completed before Christmas. On the top right, we've got, you may or may not recognise that, but a Hamilton jet unit being affixed to one of the new electric ferries. And if anyone's been out to Half Moon Bay recently, you would see the construction has commenced on the charging infrastructure for the ferry out at Half Moon Bay. On the bottom right is an example of local board project. Significant number of local board capital fund projects are in the pipeline and moving through the design and into construction phases over summer. So some really good progress moving forward with those local board projects. Dean, next slide.
Sorry.
Yeah, just looking ahead, you've already heard from Simon about special vehicle lanes and dynamic lanes. Here's some pictures to illustrate what's happening. So top right is the, top left is the dynamic lane on Main Highway. And if you look closely, you can see that that sign, it lights up when it's in use, which is the example on the right, or when the bus lane's not in use, then it's switched off. So there's real-time control of that from the Auckland Traffic Operations Centre to be able to activate the bus lane when it's required and switch it off when it's not. Bottom left is the Triangle Road bus lanes, which are planned to go live this month, in the next week or so. We're also extending the operating hours for dynamic lanes on Whangaparoa Road, that's the bottom right. And some work is progressing on cycling with the Mangere West designs going out for consultation. And also we're in good progress with the Glen Innes to Tamaki tenders for the construction of that work. Also to note that Great North Road projects, the next phase of construction will begin in January 25. So that's all for capital for me, Dean.
Okay, and on to our last one.
Lastly, but not leastly, the same day that we had contactless payments going live, we also had the cross-town changes. And that's probably a considerably big service change that we've had in the central region since the new network actually went live. And by all accounts, it's gone very well. There was a number of tag outs that had to be done within the first couple of weeks, including flags on poles and PIDs fixed, etc. But the team were sort of working there around the clock and monitoring that to make sure customers knew the services they had and what options they had. There is a few residual issues with the school bus. It's been extended to going to be extended to ACG Parnell, and to accommodate that as well. And also it may be that the team end up doing 2 afternoon runs. So they're working on with the operators in the schools on that, just to accommodate the different end times of the day, and so children aren't, waiting too long to catch their bus. But by all accounts, it's gone really well, and early data indications are that there has been uplift, which we don't immediately expect to see after a substantial change. So that's really positive in terms of that. And the neighbourhood interchanges are working really well. They're really good. Thank you.
That brings us to the end of our presentation, so I'm more than happy to take any questions. Maybe I'll leave it on one of my favourite slides.
Thanks, Dean. So we've got some questions. Ken.
Thank you. Two questions. Just first of all, about the fare evasion and the stuff that you're talking about. It's all very well to talk about it in the manner we do here, but that doesn't really convey the perceptions that the public are getting. And I know that we're supposed to not, talk it down, but just recently, for a couple of different reasons, I've had members of my family and more extended family talking to me about this. One of my sons, for 4 days, because he did something different, decided I'll get the bus. And he said to me, "You wouldn't believe the people who just walk past the driver and sit down and no one says anything." And I said, "Okay, I know that." And well, I don't know that, but the bus driver, I'm not asking him to say something. But the next question is, why the hell should I pay? And then a woman, the age of my wife, who commutes now from Orewa to the city, who made the comment, the main comment was that 3 security guys got on the one bus. And she said, "Well, why all 3? But the discussion quickly moved to how much more comfortable it feels in certain situations when those people are on the bus. So that was, are we... Screens are not just the answer to everything. What are we working? Are we going to look at increasing security presence?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. Short answer is no. We have a limited pool of people that we can deploy based on the budget we have available for that. What we are doing is working more closely with police on deployment options and what that may look like going forth. But also having the tools so we can make sure that we're using the limited resources we have to the best approach. Yeah, and so in terms of fare evasion, like your son has seen, how can we, if that's a high frequency route, we will have it on our watch list and we will be deploying transport officers on that in order to understand it better. The other thing too is updating the conditions of carriage now that we have an alternate payment mechanism, and undertaking more training and working with our operators on what that looks like in terms of questioning. it's still going to be a compromise conversation until we get more security screens in place in terms of people's levels of comfort. But that de-escalation training is the first port of call, because then you really know the intentions, you understand intentions, and a bus driver has the skills to be able to understand that situation more and whether it's going to escalate or not. So there's a number of things that sort of sit underneath that to try and help that conversation. It's not just one thing. There's multiple things happening.
Can we not make it like the train station where the door won't open until you've swiped your card? Anyway, last question, please. Some people from the organisation reached out to Councillor Henderson and myself about the busway, the bus lane, taking up the safety lane on the Northwestern Motorway. I didn't support it because it was very interesting that the report that I got said that we can't turn the safety lane into a bus lane 24/7 because its primary purpose is safety, but we were being asked to increase the time that buses had priority on that lane or took over that lane as a bus lane during the most important time for when we needed the safety, peak hour. And then the discussion just kind of, I haven't heard any more. Can you tell me where that sits? Have we now moved forward and increased the times on the Northwestern safety lane as a busway?
Thank you, Councillor. From memory, we have agreed an extension of hours within that time frame, not the full, not what AT would like, but in terms of a compromise provision to be able to use that bus lane. I think it's an additional 2 hours a day, but that's only when you've actually got the congestion on the network to be able to use it. Do you know what I mean? Like when the equivalent journey time and within the speeds of that shoulder running.
It allows you to move, it allows the bus to move into that shoulder to alleviate the, okay, thank you.
Thanks again. Richard?
Kia ora, thank you. Just because we're talking about the safety before I go on to fares, the disappointing kind of stories that came from David Seymour and Parmjeet Palmer that were seemingly incorrect, have you had a discussion with them about that? Because I think what the intent felt like was they're expecting our bus drivers to get in the way of fear of, you know, when you look at those numbers, 2 or 3%, yeah. Do you have any feedback? I know it's political, but those stories did come out and create a lot of confusion.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, they did, and myself and Rachel did meet with Parmjeet, and I know that Rachel did send some additional information thereafter in terms of fear evasion and the likes. So we did try and talk through the conversation. The problem we have is you're always going to have a for and an against conversation, and we're talking about people's safety here, and you get into a very compromised position where you're saying, don't let them on your bus, but someone's going to, punch them in the face. And that's what sometimes a bus driver is actually faced with. And we need to remember that. And so trying to have a balanced approach to that is absolutely necessary until we have the right engineering measures in place. For years we've danced around this. It's only now that we're actually putting in engineering measures because that's the point in time we're at.
And thank you. And the security, we have, 22,000 services or something a day? How many security members would we actually need if it was on every service? It just is impossible.
It would be impossible. It would be incredibly inefficient use, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Down to the private use, obviously that's a proposal, sorry, the private share. The concerns I have is that there's a nuance there, isn't it? Private share includes maintenance and other budgets, not like the fare box. How big is the gap between what we may have to charge for fares if the current proposal went ahead?
Thanks, Councillor. Like for the next couple of financial years, there would be no change. I mean, in terms of what we're actually forecasting with our own fare changes. So we wouldn't expect to see a huge, lift up over that. We're still having conversations to understand their methodology versus what we have been reporting SOI. There's very little difference. It's actually got to do with commercial revenue. The commercial revenue component in terms of commercial services. So what we actually get in that we immediately give out to the commercial operators, that seems to be the piece. In terms of what we call maintenance of our stations, etc., across the network, they're actually included in our current workings and our current models. They're actually part of it. And so we need to work through what that bucket looks like so that we mutually agree on it, because right now there is no consistent methodology that's apparent to everybody that's very clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and the other, will we give feedback on, I see in the discussion document, the fare box recovery or what we require from Aucklanders, pre-COVID is well below almost every Australasian city and New Zealand city, and what the aim would be would put us back ahead of every Australian city. Are we going to, is there a tipping point where actually the fare price, if we're having to aim to what the government is aiming, putting it way above our comparable cities, then puts everyone back in their cars and the whole transport system's pretty much stuffed? Can we give that sort of feedback? Like if you're giving feedback and us, I don't know.
Absolutely. So, I mean, right now we know, and we talked about this last month, we compare for fares, and actually we stack up pretty good internationally in terms of where our fares sit. And we also talked last month about the equity in terms of if you travel longer distances, we've made fares cheaper for you. And so we sit really well on the fare side. In terms of fare box recovery, we are the best in Australasia, dare I say it, in terms of cities across Australasia. I was talking to some of my Australasian peers last week about this topic, and so we actually stack up very well. The other part of it too that I think needs to come to fruition, and that's why we have put it in the SOI this year, is your utilisation, because it actually measures the value for money productivity of the assets you're using, and how you're using them. But there's a sliding scale for services that you have based on equity and inclusion. They're going to have a much lower in terms of utilisation, but you need them and they're essential. And then your ones like the NX ones are going to be really high in terms of utilisation. So it's making sure you measure that as a balanced package, in terms of it. So I don't have any immediate concerns about where we are, because we measure everything and we use it based on, proper data to be able to measure each part of it, to make sure that we don't get out of whack. And that's really important. Do I think we can do more in terms of increasing other revenue streams? And I would say yes, and I think we need to do more work with our other partners on that. And I'm thinking more about the land use and the commercialisation of that to bring down the cost of public transport. Therefore, the idea that you can have cheaper public transport for customers is, I think, something we'd all love. So that needs to be a focus for us going forward.
And very last question, just, that November 17 change, obviously, congratulations on those figures, especially the pay wave, etc. The routes, how often are we doing that sort of, that was quite a dramatic change, some of the routes on the shore, but also around the city and the big ones in Central, and the mayor's not stuck at Victoria Park anymore on the outer link. But, how often are you doing those quite significant reviews? Because they've made a massive difference already. Or is that like a 5-year type thing?
In terms of like a full review for that part, that was a new thing, and that was in response to travel behaviour a lot of it as well. So, I mean, post-COVID, more people wanting to travel cross-town, more cross-town journeys going from east to west, etc. But also in terms of cleaning up some historical things that actually didn't make sense, outer link, and things that, so that's one. Next year we will be doing enhancements and reviews, and we do periodic what we call timing point reviews and network reviews of that as well.
Thank you.
Desley?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Barry, it's a question for you, and I have given you a bit of a heads up on this. Have council staff made an assessment of the impacts of fare box recovery targets on our budgets? And if not, how do we know they're aligned, and can they be aligned?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll do my best to answer it, and if I get it wrong, I'm sure that Michael or Dean is going to correct me. My understanding is that this is still work in progress, and AT are working through it at the moment, and once they've got to that position, then the finance teams will work together on coming back to here with guidance on that.
Thanks, Barry, because I think that's really, really important just from a budgetary perspective. Stacey, just the last one is to you. The new ways to pay has been very successful, so congratulations on that. I'm interested in the percentage of people who don't pay, and you've just talked about, it's been so successful, and I think you mentioned that maybe people now get on the bus and they can pay because they didn't have a hop card, which is why they may have done fare evasion before. Have you seen, if you've been monitoring fare evasion, have you seen any change as a result of the other way to pay, or has it always stayed at about 3%?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. That's actually a really good question. I haven't looked the last couple of weeks. What I will do is report back in terms of what that difference is over the following couple of months, because we're still getting refined reporting with Open Loop to be able to understand what services they're coming through on, you know, with it goes towards our utilisation, which we really need come February, March, in terms of to plan and add services when we get to that peak. But yeah, I will do some look on the numbers over the last couple of weeks and come back to you, because it'll be interesting to see if we've had a drop off there.
And the second one, can you confirm that the route that you put safety officers on the routes that you know have high fare evasion or a high incidence? Because, you know, I support what Councillor Turner said, you know, people feel more confident if there are passengers on, if there is security on services that are known to be a bit difficult. So you monitor that and you move them around based on that?
Absolutely, we do. So they are deployed based on the intelligence we receive. And so every week they look at that, or maybe in response to particular events. So they're not static, they don't go on the same thing at different times of day, they mix it up.
Finally, can you confirm you're looking at potential public transport options on the outer link, potentially the 75? Is it looking for ASB?
Yes, to be able to service the tennis, definitely. So the team are going to come back to me on what options there are. Yeah.
Thanks, Leslie. Joe?
Thank you. Congratulations on all the good news that you've presented to us today. Thank you. I wanted to ask, in regards to the fare evasion, being teenagers and school students, the majority, is there a link between that and how we changed and you're not free between 5 and 12 years old anymore on public transport? Could that be one of the reasons that people are catching up to the fact that it's changed now?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, that's definitely one. There's also an affordability conversation in terms of youth actually having the means to pay their fare and actually be equipped to be able to do that. That's the other challenge. Yeah, and that's a real challenge for many kids across Auckland.
Yeah, I figured. I don't know if Palmer, the MP, actually catches a bus, but it's not realistic to start issuing warnings. That'll just garner a lot of aggression to the bus driver and put others at risk on the bus. I've been on the bus and I've seen bus drivers kind of turn the other way when someone gets on the bus and you can tell that they're vulnerable, like you can tell like that, you know, homelessness may be an issue. They're not dangerous. They're just, you know, they just got stuff going on and they're no harm to anyone. And I've appreciated when the bus driver just lets them on. Nobody's at risk. It's just, you know, you feel sorry for them. They just need to get somewhere. So I do appreciate that part. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Julie?
Thank you very much. I've got questions on just a couple of things, but I wanted to say first, I wanted to acknowledge Pete Moth and Ed Newbegin, and no doubt lots of other people, for their work on the crosstown bus changes. They were really responsive to community concerns, fronted up to meetings with business associations and the public and all sorts of stuff, talked through some really hard issues, and I just wanted to pass on my respect and gratitude for that work. And also to acknowledge that a survey's already got, I've already, as a user of the crosstown buses, already got a survey asking me how I think it's going, so that's good to see too. And I won't speak and comment now, Mr. Chair. I have questions around potholes, and then I have questions around safety. So with the potholes, and I think it's great, and I've been hearing from people that the targets are getting met, so that's good. And I logged one this morning, so we'll see, clock's ticking. And I just wanted to know, are we getting reports of potholes that aren't in our network? And so, like, for example, you talked before about working with shopping malls about moving traffic, but also there's a particular shopping place not far from me where people are often complaining to me about a pothole that is on private land. What are we doing with those complaints? Are we sending them on to the landowner, or do we just go, sorry, not our responsibility? Because there is a perception that it is our responsibility even though it isn't.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think it's very valid. To be honest, I'm not sure exactly what we do when those types of potholes are logged, but I can go away and find out more details. But definitely we're only fixing potholes that are within the Auckland Transport Network, and potholes on private networks are the responsibility of those private road managers.
And yeah, and I think that's as it should be. What's happening in that grey space where it's actually like a park, a council park? Are we sending that on to council parks? I imagine we already did that, but just checking.
Yeah, there's good communication between the council departments, and so those types of things would be forwarded on to the relevant department. But I'll have to go away and find out whether we're forwarding on information on potholes on private networks.
Yeah, thank you. So then my next round of questions is around the safety stuff. And I'm aware that First Union, who I met with reasonably recently, and I know they're working with the other unions in the space, like Gary Froggatt's union, the Tramways, they've put together a report, have you received that report? Okay, not yet, all right. One of the things they're asking for in that report is looking at the central government funding for safety initiatives, that there be sort of a sector-wide conference or something to work out what are actually the most effective ways to spend that money. Is that something that AT is looking at doing in terms of the central government additional funds?
The central government additional funds has been directed towards the driver screens currently. We're the only PT actually doing the driver screens. It's also going towards, I think, driver rest facilities, etc., those types of things. Does there need to be broader conversation and alignment? Yes. We actually have Fraser that's going out meeting with all the unions and drivers over the next couple of weeks. He's been doing it the last couple of weeks, which is good. He's getting a lot of good feedback from them, which is really helpful in terms of what's meaningful and matters.
Cool. And just a couple of other things from that. So one of the things that's come up is the idea of really looking at the kind of de-escalation training that we're giving to drivers. It's not absolutely not to blame drivers at all, but to set them up with the right tools and support. And acknowledging that most de-escalation training is given at the start of employment, and there aren't necessarily refreshers. There's a number of situations that have been changing, for example, vaping on buses now, which, can be another point of confrontation, particularly for passengers. So is that something that AT would potentially look at in some of the contractual arrangements with the bus companies, acknowledging there are the employees of the bus companies, but is that something we will look at as adding into those contracts? Yes. Regular de-escalation training, not just at start of employment.
Absolutely, Councillor, we're doing that.
Great. Yeah. And then final question on this space, which is one that I actually posed to Neil from the union as well, and he's going to see what his members think, but interested in your perspective on it. And we actually had a little mention of it before. We know in public spaces that having more people around, having passive surveillance and stuff does decrease attacks and bad behaviour generally. Is that something that we see on buses? Are the buses where we're having the most trouble the ones that have lower patronage? Does it align with times of day when there's lower patronage? Do we have that kind of data? Because I think that would be really useful. That will tell us that actually increasing patronage potentially also has a safety impact as well. That's correct? Okay, great. It'd be good to get some data on that at some point. Thank you.
Thanks, Shirley. Daniel?
Good afternoon. This will be my only contribution, but I firstly want to echo commendations for the work that you're doing in relation to pothole repairs. I think that that's good work. I certainly think that there is a strong level of community support for that work. And long may that continue, and hopefully we can get to the point where the network is sufficiently resilient that the breakout of those potholes becomes a little less of an issue in the future. My question relates to network optimisation, and particularly the work that's been taking place around the intersection signalisation. You had a couple of recent projects in my ward. We've installed light signals, which is very good. What I'm seeing now from Auckland Transport is is a greater level of acceptance, I think, that interventions and measures such as network signalisation for the installation of signals doesn't necessarily need to come with raised platforms as well. There seems to be a shift, which I think is good, away from, you know, the bells and whistles and the raised platforms and how the new world order in terms of these things is going to work, you know, to perhaps more of a an acceptance that the intervention might not be as optimal as an engineer would like, but it's still going to be an improvement. Is that a policy position from on high? And as we move forward, as these local board requests do come through, is that type of approach likely to be able to ensure that we can continue to fund these improvements at these intersections to address measures of safety and efficiency?
Thank you for the question. The answer is it a policy position from on high? Yes, it was definitely a shift in approach. We had a funding approach previously that encouraged raised platforms whenever there was a safety intervention for pedestrians. We made the call when the policy and the funding shifted that actually we need to go back to a safe system approach that said there's a number of interventions and any one of those could be optimal. They didn't have to be at this end, which might be a raised pedestrian platform accompanied by a signalised intersection. It could be anywhere from a flush pedestrian crossing of the old zebra type through to the raised platform and signalised intersection. So we've done that work, and so you're seeing that reflect through into what's happening out on the transport network. We've also got only by exception, and I think I can only think of one so far in the last 12 months, only by exception would you put any raised element into an arterial road, because their primary purpose is movement. Now, we do get some instances where we have a lot of, vehicle movement. We do get some instances where we have a lot of passenger movement at 90 degrees to the vehicle movement. And under those conditions, we're very thoughtful about what we need to do to provide for pedestrian safety, because you need both. So we are thinking through this a lot more, and we're taking a safe system approach.
That's very good. That different approach, that the culture from on high, that's been set from on high, has been well received across the organisation, or you've got the engineers basically accepting it through clenched teeth. I'm not sure about that, but I think that that's good. What's been the level of feedback that you've had from the local boards in these areas where you're having these subsequent interventions, which will include signalisations, but for which the raised platforms might not now be included? Any concerns raised, or generally it's been a matter where there is an acceptance of the new approach?
The local boards want the same as what you want, which is what we want, which is safety for whether you're on a bike, a motorbike, a car, or as a pedestrian. I would say, generally speaking, the closer you get to a school or a town centre where you've got a lot of people movement, the desire for a raised element is greater. But our prerequisite for any safety intervention is there's got to be a safety case for it. We need local board support for it. We need local community support for it as well. So it could be the town centre or the school or whomever. And we need the budget for it. The budget is a timing issue, not an if issue. It's a when issue. But you need those elements before we would put something in. And we will come to the local board or the local business association with our thinking before the intervention took place. I think that change in approach has also alleviated a fair bit of the tension around what is and what isn't going to happen. I do think we didn't quite have the right approach before. It was more of a dictate, this is now consult, engage, and then agree approach. But we do have views on where these interventions are across the network, that intelligence is helpful to local boards and local communities understanding what the risk is and therefore informing quality decision making.
And my one final comment, if I may, Chair, is that I echo the positive feedback that Auckland Transport rightly received from the community in relation to what you did on Weymouth Road in my ward. I think that it was quite a significant intervention, but it was timed very tight and you got it done. And I think that whilst there was temporary inconvenience, the speed of the implementation of that was to AT's credit. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Daniel. Mayor Brown.
Thank you for that presentation. I've got a couple of questions. I'm interested in the fare subsidies. I know that it's pretty much the same for the buses right across the thing, but we get a couple of outliers with some of those ferries. And can we publish those so that we can see? It should be some consistent thing about 30-odd%, which is what I think the buses are. Is that not right? Yeah. And so I don't think that people quite understand that there are substantial subsidies in all fares, even when people say, you know, gosh, we've got to make them affordable. Somebody's paying for all that, and I'd like to see them more clearly subsidised and clearly known. So am I wrong in thinking there's a couple of wild outsiders in the ferry thing? What are they?
I can jump in there. That's coming to a trick meeting in March, and I think so. There's quite a big piece of work getting done to bring that work to the March meeting.
All right. Well, if we haven't got it, I'll wait for that. Second one was the government have recently reduced the amount of speed limits around the town. We've got quite a lot at the moment, rather more than most of us know about. And you had quite a large budget for changing that. I've just got a couple of questions about how that's made up, because it did seem quite a lot of money. Presumably, if there's a 40k sign, which is now going to be a 50 or 30 or 40, I'm not quite sure. There's quite a bit of change that's been asked for. Are we just going to make a sticker and stick it on that one? We're not going to take the whole bloody thing down and put it up again, I hope, are we?
So what we've asked, we've got 1,800 roads where we will need to review and implement speed changes. There's been a big program of this over a long time, and so that is a reasonably comprehensive program that will take time and effort. That's the first point. The second point is there is an allowance, and I know it was quite a big number too, by the way, so I'm not detracting from that.
29 mil or something, right?
Yeah, so look, I haven't pressure tested the number, to be fair, because the team are working on it, but there's components. You've got to manage 1,800 roads. We've got to get it done by the end of June. First point. Second point is that we need some variable signs in that. We also need to consult. And the third one is how do we change static signs? You know, the 30 to a 40, the 40 to a 50, the 50 to an 80, or whatever the changes are. So we will work through that. And look, it won't end up being that number. It'll end up being the right number. But I don't want to promise what it is at this stage, because I don't have that information to hand.
Well, that's fair enough.
Sure
I don't want to see people pulling down signs when you could just stick on 40 over 30. That'd be good.
Yeah, if we can get away with that and it lasts, then that's fine. And that might buy us time.
Probably last until the next legislative change, so it doesn't have to last forever, mate. So,
yeah.
and then, with the government removing the financial contribution for Richard Ray's crossings, there's about 23 of them on either side of the Great North Road. Are they in or out of the funding?
We've done a lot of work on that. I can't remember the exact numbers, to be fair, but they that's for side entry. Actually, Murray, you might know the answer. I'll keep quiet.
Yeah. So there's no raised elements on Great North Road main arterial. There are some included on side roads for the entry treatment to protect the cyclists coming through. The funding for the Great North Road is in the approved NZTA budget, so whatever works are involved in the project are included in approved funding already.
Okay, so that they haven't fallen foul of the statement from the Minister that they will not fund any of that Rose crossing work. I'm just making sure that we don't spend this and find we haven't got the money.
All projects that were pre-approved in the pipeline, there's been no adjustments to the scope. However, we have reviewed that design quite comprehensively and taken out any elements that are not required.
Well, thank you. Good answers, questions. Thank you for that.
Shane.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Most of my questions have been asked, which is pretty cool. While I've got the mic, I'll just I don't need to, nonetheless, I'll power through. While I've got the mic, I don't need to comment, so I'll just quickly have a couple of sentences, if you don't mind. Just congrats for the WX1, just a fantastic result, making a huge difference to actually quality of life in West Auckland. It's fantastic. And also I want to talk about the operation of the $50 fare cap, but we might talk about that offline later. Just signaling a meeting request might be coming through. And speaking of which, I just want to dig down on the patronage data per route. I've got a bit of a cunning plan ahead. And I'm just wondering quickly, do I email you, Stacey, or can you put me in touch with someone? Cool. Thank you so much. That was all, really. Thank you, Chair.
Nice work. Sharon?
Thank you. Really good work on the potholes. Just on the potholes, I note that in Thames a couple of years ago, there was somebody that had actually fallen into a pothole, and it was on private business land. What I'm just going to suggest is maybe we should have some sort of a bylaw that businesses where members of the public are able to drive on or walk on or whatever, that we should have a bylaw, and it won't be Auckland Transport, but maybe the call centres can all make sure that they, I'm losing my voice again, sorry, make sure that all the proper authorities are notified. Potholes that are on, let's say the Pakaringa Plaza or something like that, and if we get a call, the Pakaringa Plaza is actually Auckland Transport, but a lot of shopping centres, we should be able to have a bylaw that WorkSafe get involved, and something has to happen. I see out at Totra Heights, they had some issues out there, and they were trying to get NZTA and Auckland Transport to sort out all their potholes out there. The businesses, nobody wanted to sort it out, but I think maybe this is something that we should really all together, we should be making sure that WorkSafe, if somebody does ring the call centre, that WorkSafe get involved and we get it sorted. So, sorry about my voice again.
I think that was a statement rather than a question, but I just want to make one comment irrespective, thank you, Councillor, and that is that we recognise a lot of the public assume that the local shopping centre car park might be, well, they just don't differentiate between Auckland Transport, Auckland Council and the local owner. So there might be something in there on clearer signage, and if you've got a pop room, then you need to contact this number. But this is a really tricky space that you just need to think through as a council. To what degree do you want to be involved in intervening in private land, telling them how to pave their pavement? And I had an instance yesterday, which one of the councillors knows about, where on a private footpath outside a shop, there was 4 bolts sticking up. Clearly something had been bolted down. They took the pole away, but didn't take the bolts away. The bolts are protruding. Somebody fell over and badly injured themselves, taken off to hospital. I got our team out anyway to grind the bolts down, but it's on private land. So that was a safety critical situation in my mind. Where we do have problems on private land, we need to call it out. We need to let the responsibility lie where it falls, because that is their WorkSafe, that is their liability issue. How we do that, we can work more closely at. But I think it's a very challenging area for us and does require more thought.
I guess that when we give a consent for businesses to build, they have to provide car parking, and they have to provide what the council's actually asking them. And it would be so much easier if we actually tried to work with how work safe and you know, anyway.
I think,
You
and
know
I
where
saw,
I'm coming from.
I saw the head of our regulatory committee, whether she meant to or not, nodding her head in agreement. So I think you're right, but it's probably off.
I know it's a bit off track, but they do get all the calls for potholes, and when they know, and they've had something reported, and you know, Dean's has told us about somebody tripping over and they ended up in hospital because they'd shaved it, but they, whatever. So, I mean, it can fall back upon us.
And I think Murray responded before that he was going to provide some information about what we do with private landowners. So thank you. Honey?
Kia ora. I'm just wanting to make reference, especially with all your achievements that you've identified, whether there is a huge achievement with Māori outcome delivery. I just never picked up. I came in a bit late, but I heard you talk about the safety of the hikoio. Were there any other, which was a big outcome in terms of getting them across the Auckland Bridge? But have you done anything in the last month or so in terms of working towards a Māori outcome?
Look, since I'm just trying to reflect, I haven't come prepared with an answer, sorry. Look, we have got, within our statement of intent, we've got a range of things we're very committed to working on. I'm just going across those metrics in my mind. We've seen our percentage procurement continue to lift. I think we're now at or just slightly ahead of our procurement target for Māori businesses, so that's good. In terms of marae, we're on target for that. In terms of our broader commitment to Māori outcomes, that remains on track. But if there was something specific you're worried about, I'm more than happy to respond. But in general terms, that's a deep commitment, and I've not had reflected through to me anything that that's worrying people about what we're not doing, but I'm always happy to engage further on that. So maybe it's something we talk about afterwards, if that's helpful.
That'd be great, because I did make reference that the Papakanga Marae are still fully funded, going in some of your kōrero that you give. But I'd like to follow up afterwards with you.
So that's still funded, and we're still focused on delivering those outcomes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. No more questions. So thank you, team. We'll step back. And so comments, Desley?
Oh, just a quick one. Thank you. Dean, to you and the Auckland Transport team, it must be a pretty tough time for you at the moment with a lot of uncertainty. You come here with some fantastic highlights once again. And I think it's up to each and every one of us to talk to our people within our communities about those highlights and the fact that, you know, I mean, 200,000 trips since not even a month with non-hop card users on our public transport is pretty amazing, let alone your potholes and your Northwest bus improvements, your Botany Station, etc., and your Christmas promotions. So, look, just from me, and hopefully from everybody, just thank you. No one comes to work wanting to stuff public transport or anything else up. So thank you to you and your team. To Aucklanders, all 7 of you watching online or whatever, I think it's important that we thank our hardworking bus drivers, transport officers, wardens and other staff who are out there making sure that public transport is working as efficiently as possible, and that goes for those behind the scenes as well. So season's greetings from all of us to you. And just finally, never be afraid to come to the table with things that are keeping you awake at night. You know, it's great to accentuate the positive, but a problem shared is a problem halved, so never be afraid to do that either. So just that's it for me, thanks.
Thanks, Desley, and it's amateur hour here up the top end, so she's going to move this because she's so enthused by it, is that correct? And Julie's going to second it, so, right. Any other further comments? John Watson, camera on.
Yeah, okay, all right, yeah, you heard that the first time, Mr. Chair. So I'd just like to make a few comments about, what I think is the good work that's been done on some of the network optimization by AT. And I think that's quite necessary to overcome the kind of, the sort of people who know the cost of everything and the value of nothing, because transport networks are complex operations, and the overall success of which really depends on tying together a number of factors. And I really want to congratulate Stacey in particular for her presence in making some of the, or at least enabling some.
Oh, you've moved and pressed your button to mute yourself, John, with all of that hand movement.
Yep, sorry, okay, so I'm just saying how important network optimization is across Auckland as a whole, but it takes a bit of an overview to make that work, rather than the tendency exists at some stage just to zero in on one part that without a real knowledge of how that part then fits into the wider service as a whole, whether it be ordinary vehicular commuters, whether it be public transport, or whether it be the particular modes of public transport, rail, train and ferry. And I say that because if we just look at costs, then yes, you can zero in on operational costs, but then you must also look at capital costs. So you have massive investments in some modes that go to literally billions and billions of dollars, which doesn't sometimes get, well, doesn't at all actually get captured in that kind of narrow analysis that some people favour. But if I give us a bit of a case example, what happens in some parts of the Albany ward, we have the dynamic laning, which essentially has doubled the capacity on the main arterial route onto Whangaparāoa Peninsula, and has been doing that for a number of years now at a bargain basement cost. I don't know if it hit $2 million. It was $1.5 million at one point. And as a stopgap measure, that stopgap measure has now gone into 5-7 years of operation, the return on that investment has been quite phenomenal. However, even when it comes to massive big investment, as we have with the Penlink project, which is an $835 million project, the intricacies of the network are such that we are told by no less an authority than NZTA, for instance, that if it's untold, that will produce congestion on the northern motorway where that Penlink connection comes in. So before we've even started, we've got congestion as a consequence of a near $1 billion project. But what helps that work as a whole, in this case, according to NZTA, is tolling to limit the demand there. But just as importantly as that are the public transport interventions that take people off that northern motorway and off a 16-kilometre long peninsula. So, for instance, the ferry at the outer third of the peninsula takes off a significant number of people from both the internal network and the motorway network, and that is quite telling in terms of the overall flow then along Whangaparāoa Road, and then ultimately the feed-ins to the northern motorway. So without labouring then the bus component, which then takes in another quotient of people and deals with a different approach or access to the same network. So I guess what I'm trying to say, Mr. Chair, is that I'm appreciative of the AT expertise that looks at that bigger picture, whether it's in the Albany ward or anywhere else in Auckland, and has a little bit of awareness of how it all fits together and the relative cost efficiencies that go with each initiative. And certainly from the last I guess, 12 months in particular, our community has been appreciative of the kind of insight that people like Stacey have exhibited and have been reflected in what we regard as good transport outcomes for all the people in our community. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, John. Any further comments? None. Okay, just before we close up. So obviously, again, I just want to echo the sort of the thoughts on some of the really positive stuff we've heard today. But I also just want to comment on, I guess there's been some announcements this week, obviously, that has led to a bit of confusion, probably a little bit of anxiety within AT in particular. And I just want to say, look, I think whoever's making the decision, and this is about the decision making leading in a period of time, there's a bit of water to go under that bridge yet, but whoever is making the decision, they are going to be reliant on quality people giving quality advice. And I think today we've seen again that we are getting quality advice from people who have a lot of respect, and I've heard it echoed around this room a number of times, a lot of respect. And so whatever that means over summer, it's a little bit of an unsettling time over summer, but we've got a long way to go before the processes of legislation change finally play out. Probably many of us in this room, we may or may not be here because it'll be that long, and that is, I guess, one of the things that we all play into, the uncertainty of every 3 years we have to go through a job interview, and sometimes we are taking the heat for things that we have very little influence over, as the Mayor has said a number of times. So I guess I just ask that over the summer we don't try not to overthink what's coming. We will always need really good people giving really good advice to enable us to make good decisions and set good direction. So I just want to thank the team at Auckland Transport. As you head into a holiday period, just try and enjoy it a little bit and get a break if you can. But thank you very much for what you've delivered today and what you continue to deliver for Aucklanders. So thanks very much. So it's been moved and seconded, and so I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. And against, carried. Thank you.